Good morning, students. Today we are moving to another area in our hereditary and evolution chapter. That is, the evolution can be occur by different stages. Okay, so in our last chapter we discussed about what is evolution, what are the evidences of evolution, then what is speciation, what is extinction. Okay, so all these things we already taught in our previous classes. So today we are moving to the evolution of stages. Okay, so many structures which are present in an organism that are evolved by several generations. Okay, all those organs are evolved by several stages. Like that, some stages of evolution that we are moving to see in today's lecture. First one, evolution of eyes. Okay, evolution of eyes. We know the eye is a very important organ for animals. Okay, eye is a very important organ for animals, and the eye is the most complicated organ which cannot be generated by a single DNA change. Okay, so we cannot produce, or we cannot develop, or the eye is not developed by a single DNA change. Okay, so it is not a single variation. So, the complex body organ of animals such as eyes have been created in stages over many generations. So, eye is not developed by a sudden change. Okay, so it is developed by several generations. Then, first of all the rudimentary eye, which like that of flatworms. Okay, all the rudimentary eye, that is the basic eye, which is look like flatworm. Okay, that is planaria, was formed. The first formed eye was the basic eye, that is which is similar to the planaria, that is flatworm eyes. Okay, and the eyes of flatworm are very simple and that are actually response to detect light only. So basic eye means they can detect only the presence of light. Okay, so even these rudimentary eyes provide a survival advantages to the planaria. Okay, so the rudimentary eyes provide a survival advantage to the flatworm. Starting from this basic design, more and more complex eyes were evolved in various organisms. So the basic is the first stage of eye is the basic eye. From that basic eye, more and more complex eyes are evolved in various organisms. Most of the animals have eyes, that we all know, that most of the animals have eyes except some blind worms like that. Then the structure of eye in each of these organisms is however different, which suggests their separate evolutionary origin. Okay, so when the organism differ, the structure of eye also differ, which what implies that they are separately evolved. Okay, so those eyes are not in the same tree in the evolutionary. Okay, they are in different evolutionary origin. So the evolution of eye is an example for evolution by stages. So this is planaria. Okay, so first one is evolution of eye. So the first formed is the basic eye, which is present in the flatworm, and they have the ability to detect the light only. Then generations and generation passed, more complex evolved type of eyes are produced in various organisms. Okay, and the structure of eye may be different in different organism, which shows the separate evolutionary origin. So eye is an example of evolutionary stages. Then next one is evolution of feathers. Okay, we know the feathers which are present in the birds. Birds use these feathers for fly. Okay, normally we think like that, but sometime an evolutionary change produced in an organism for one purpose later on becomes more useful for an entirely different function. Okay, so in that organism in that organism, a particular part or particular organ is evolved for one function, but one time's gone or one generation after generation, that particular organ may function entirely different from the beginning. So for example, birds evolved feathers as a mean of providing insulation to their body in cold weather. But later on these feathers become useful for the purpose of flying. So the first when the feathers are produced in birds, their function is not for flying. Their function is to provide insulation to their body in cold weather. That is to provide a warm condition to their body in the cold condition. Okay, but when times passes, what happens means the feathers become useful for the purpose of flying. The presence of feathers on birds tell us that the birds are very closely related to reptiles because dinosaurs were reptiles. Okay, we know dinosaurs has the ability to fly. So the presence of feathers on birds tell us that the birds are very closely related to reptiles because were reptiles. We already discussed about that pterosaur in the beginning class. Okay, from how a pterosaur developed from a lizard. Even dinosaurs has feather, though they could not fly by using these feathers. The presence of feathers on birds tell us that the birds are very closely related to dinosaurs, that is reptiles. So these are about the evolution of feathers. Okay, so sometimes an evolutionary change produced in an organism for one purpose later on become more useful for an entirely different function. Example is the evolution of feathers in birds. Okay, these feathers are mainly evolved to provide insulation to their bodies in cold weather. But later on these feathers become more useful for the purpose of flying. Then evolution by artificial selection. Okay, so we have studied that very dissimilar looking structures can evolve from a common ancestral body design. Very dissimilar looking structures can evolve from a common ancestral body design. But that was all guesswork about what happened in history long time ago. So we will now give an example from the present time which will show the different looking organism can in fact be created from the some basic design of the ancestor. Okay, so a very dissimilar structures can be evolved from a common ancestral body design. Then modification of a species by human intervention so that certain desirable traits are represented in successive generation. So here we humans are intervening in the evolution. So modification of a species by human intervention so that certain desirable traits are represented in successive generation. So due to the intervention of human, there produce some traits which are desirable and that trait can be passed to successive generation. So the wild cabbage play a good example to prove that entirely different looking organism can evolve from the same organism by the process of evolution. Okay, so an example is cabbage. Wild cabbage, it shows a good example to prove the entirely different or dissimilar structures can be evolved from a same common ancestor. The only difference is that here we are using artificial selection for evolution in place of natural selection. We already discussed what is natural selection, but here we are artificially selecting. Okay, artificially selecting means our human involvement is there. This will become clear for the following discussion that we are moving to. Okay, so this is the wild cabbage. You can see the wild cabbage. From wild cabbage, so many different structures which we obtained, that is cauliflower, then broccoli, cabbage, kale, coribabi. Okay, so like that, so many different plants or different plant products that we obtained. First one is cabbage. How cabbage is produced? Okay, when some farmers wanted to have very short distance between the leaves of wild cabbage and produce the common variety of cabbage. So what happened means some farmers, they want the distance between the leaves should be very less. Okay, so by applying that idea in the wild cabbage, we obtain the cabbage which we are using in our culinaries and which we are having in the salad and everything. Okay, that is the cabbage. Then second one is when farmers opted for the arrested flower development of wild cabbage plant, it lead to the production of another variety of cabbage called broccoli. So when farmers opted for the arrested flower development of wild cabbage, so what they done is they arrested the floral development. When they arrested the floral development, we obtain another good product, that is broccoli. Then third one, some farmers went in for sterile flowers of wild cabbage and developed another variety of cabbage called cauliflower. So some farmers went in for sterile flowers of wild cabbage and developed another variety of cabbage called cauliflower. So cauliflower is the sterile flowers of wild cabbage. Then next, when farmers opted for the solan parts of wild cabbage, it led to the evolution of yet another variety of cabbage called Rabbi. Okay, Rabbi, when farmers opted the solan part of wild cabbage, which leads to the evolution of another variety of cabbage, is called Rabbi. And finally, when farmers wanted to grow large leaves of wild cabbage and ended up producing a leafy vegetable called kale, which is also a variety of wild cabbage. Okay, so farmers required leaves of wild cabbage, so they ended up in producing leafy vegetable called kale. So due to the activity of humans or due to the activity of human need, we produce so many different varieties from a common ancestor which are look like entirely dissimilar. Okay, first one is cabbage by the reduction of distance between the leaves of wild cabbage. Then second one is broccoli by arresting the floral development. Third one is cauliflower by selecting the sterile flowers of wild cabbage. Then fourth one is the kohlrabi by opting the solan part of wild cabbage. And finally the large leaves of wild cabbage, that is kale. So these are the dissimilar structures which evolved from a common ancestor by the artificial selection by human intervention. Then next one is the evolution should not be equated with progress. Okay, so we finished the evolution by stages, that is evolution by eyes, evolution by feathers, evolution by artificial selection. Okay, now we are moving to some common topics. Okay, now we are moving to some common topics, that is evolution should not be equated with progress. So there is no real progress in the concept of evolution. There is no real progress in the concept of evolution. Actually, evolution is just the production of diversity of life form and shaping of this diversity by the environmental selection. So actually, evolution is just the production of diversity of life forms. Okay, so different type or different variety of life forms are producing and shaping this diversity by the environmental selection. So environment is shaping that diversity by selecting, okay, those organisms which are fit for the environment, or those organisms they have the favorable condition or favorable variations, they are selected by the environment, and those who have no such variation, they are unfit to live in that environment and they are eliminated from the environment by nature itself. The only progress in evolution appears to be that more and more complex body designs of organisms have emerged over the ages. Okay, when ages are passing, more and more complex body designs of organisms are emerged. This will become more clear by some examples. Okay, so we are taking an example of what we are thinking is, it is a common belief that chimpanzees are ancestors of human beings, but actually that is not true. Actually, both chimpanzees and human beings had a common long time ancestor ago. Okay, so both chimpanzees and human beings have the common ancestor. Okay, so what happened means when time passes, they shape the organism. Okay, due to the environmental selection, they are modify the organism. So when a new species is formed, it is not necessary that all species will disappear. Okay, so there is no such necessity for the disappearance of all the species when there is a new species are formed in the earth. So it will all depend on the environment. It is strictly or purely dependent on the environment. Also, it is not as if newly formed species are in any way better than the older ones. If the newly formed species are not better than the old ones, then obviously the old ones should not be eliminated from the earth. Okay, so simply that the genetic drift and natural selection process have combined to form a population having different body design which cannot interpret with older population. So strictly we already discussed how these evolutions are happening by the genetic drift and natural selection. Okay, then we already discussed that the both the chimpanzees and human beings had a common ancestor, and the two offsprings of the ancestor evolved in their own separate way to form the modern day chimpanzees and human beings. So when time passes, that is when generation to generation are passing, more shaping and modification in the organism takes place. So that's why how we are looking now and the chimpanzees are looking like that. Okay, so the body designs of older organisms were inefficient. Then what happened? The new organisms are selected and the old organisms are eliminated. Okay, another example. The simplest and primitive life forms are called bacteria, which are still inhabit some of the most inhospitable, that is unfavorable habitats such as hot spring, deep sea and ice in Antarctica. Okay, so most other organisms cannot survive in such harsh environment. So if even though evolutions are happened, the bacteria are not changed. Why? Because such bacteria can only withstand in such extreme condition. So some are new bacteria may be evolved, but they lack the ability to survive in such extreme conditions. So the old ones are not eliminated or what replaced by the new ones. Okay, so these are about the evolution which should not be equated with progress. Then next common topic is human evolution. Okay, so human evolution has been studied by various tools of tracing evolutionary relationship like digging the earth, carbon dating, studying fossil and determining DNA sequence. Okay, so to know about the evolution of human beings, we take so many evolutionary traces. Okay, like carbon dating, studying of several fossils and determining the DNA sequence. Okay, so there is so much diversity of human body and features on the earth that for long time people used to talk about different races of human beings which can be obtained. Okay, then the human races were even identified on the basis of their skin color, which we named as white, black, yellow, or brown. It is now known that so called human races have not evolved differently. In fact, there is no biological basis for dividing human beings into different races. All human beings are a single species called Homo sapiens. Okay, so this is just an introduction regarding the human evolution. So if we can see human beings of different races, maybe white human, black, yellow, brownish compulsion, like that, but we cannot segregate or separate human beings based on the races. All are what belong to the same species, that is Homo sapiens. Okay, where we have lived for the past few thousands years, we all come from Africa. Okay, so we all are evolved from Africa. The earliest member of human species, that is Homo sapiens, can be traced there. Okay, so by several tracing evolutionary relationship, we obtained a data that Homo sapiens are from the Africa. Our genetic footprint can be traced back to our African roots. Okay, so our genetic footprints or our tracing, evolutionary tracing, which leads to the Africa. Some of our ancestors left Africa while others stayed on. Some stayed in the Africa itself, some way moved out of the African country. Then Mendel experiment tell us the mode of inheritance of characters from one generation to the next, and Darwin theory of evolution tell us how organism developed from simple to more complex forms. So in the hereditary portion we discuss about the Mendel experiment. In the evolutionary portion we discuss about the Darwin theory. In the Mendel experiment, he tells us about the mode of inheritance of traits. Okay, how the traits are transmitting or inheriting from generation to generation. But in Darwin theory of evolution, how the organism developed from simple to complex forms. Okay, so human evolution has been studied using various tools. All these things we discussed. So that's all about human evolution. Finally, a small area, that is origin of life. Okay, so we already know about the origin of life. You may studied in physics, chemistry and everything. Okay, the Big Bang theory and everything. Then a British scientist, that is J.B.S. Haldane, who suggested in 1920 that life must have developed from simple inorganic molecules which were present on the earth soon after it was formed. Okay, so life forms are developed from simple or inorganic molecule. It may include methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. Life forms are evolved from simple inorganic molecules such as methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. Okay. He also said that the conditions on earth at that time could have converted simple inorganic molecule into complex organic molecules which were necessary for life. Some earth conditions may converted the simple inorganic molecules into organic molecules, and these complex organic molecules must have joined together to form the first primitive living organism. Okay, this is what Haldane said. Okay, so Haldane also suggested from the theoretical considerations that living organism originate in sea water. Living organism originated in the sea water. Okay, so Haldane, he said that the life forms are originated from simple inorganic molecules. The earth condition which provided a optimum situation for the conversion of simple inorganic molecules to complex organic molecules, and such complex organic molecules join together to form a first primitive living thing, and the first living thing which was originated in the sea water. So these are the findings by Haldane. Okay, then Darwin theory of evolution tells us how life evolved from simple to more complex organic forms, and the Mendel which tells about the inheritance that we already discussed. Okay, then the theory of origin of life on earth which was proposed by Haldane was confirmed by the experiments conducted by Stanley and Hart. Okay, so Miller and Urey experiment. You will study Urey and Miller experiment in your higher classes, how life forms are evolved from simple inorganic molecules. Okay, so the Haldane theory was confirmed by the Urey and Miller experiment. Okay, so you will study Urey and Miller experiment in your higher classes. So these are about today's class. So remaining only two topics are there in evolution. So that is ABO blood group system and the sex determination. So ABO blood group system and sex determination are the two topics which remained in this chapter. All other portions we covered. Actually this is very easy portion compared to hereditary, evolution is very easy. It is only theoretical. You just go through the textbook thoroughly and prepare notes. We will see the sex determination and the ABA blood group in our coming classes. Okay, so by these two topics we can complete our chapter 9, hereditary and evolution. Okay, so that's all about today. Attend your recap test and send your marks to me within the allotted time. Thank you, students. Thank you.